One thing you're liable to hear in a conversation about the Al-Aqsa flood is that history didn't begin on October 7th. And while that sounds like a real no-doy, obviously kind of answer, it actually does bear repeating because of the way the US government and media frame the world to their people. When a country crosses the threshold from being a proxy of the US empire to being an outpost for any degree of resistance to the US empire, for all intents and purposes in the American psyche, that country springs forth into existence at that precise moment, because prior to that moment, its existence had no reason to be spoken of by the US government or in the US media to any real degree. There are quite a few examples of this in practice, the most disproportionate of which might be Cuba. Prior to the 1959 revolution that overthrew the US-backed dictatorship of Fulgencio Batista and brought the communist insurgency of the movement of the 26th of July to power, the most an average American was likely to know about Cuba was that they had some nice beaches, and that maybe some of their fruit and sugar was imported from there. The tourism industry there, largely owned and controlled by the American mafia, and the agricultural conglomerates importing cheap goods from Cuban fincas were highly profitable, and they worked closely with the local landowning aristocrats to squeeze the Cuban people for labor. The US military had already taken a permanent foothold on the island after kicking out the Spanish in 1898, by way of the Guantanamo Bay US naval base that remains in operation to this day. The US was really in charge in Cuba, not even just the US government through its puppets in the military and politics, but American businesses and the mafia economically. All you needed to know was that Cuba was a happy little island filled with happy little workers doing their happy little jobs. What good would it have done a newspaper like the New York Times or the Washington Post to promote regime change against a military dictatorship violating civil and human rights in Cuba when they were selling ads in their pages to the United Fruit Company, now Chiquita Bananas, and Hershey, one of the companies who bought up a huge chunk of the sugar industry in Cuba after US banks loan sharked the domestic Cuban sugar companies to near extinction in the 1920s. Cuba was a back page story in the US before 1959, if it was a story at all. If there's no reason for the US regime to want to overthrow a government, then there's basically no motivation for anyone in the government or the media to communicate anything to the people about that country.